Today, the United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism.
Many pundits say there is a chance that Pyongyang will react negatively towards Washington. President Trump's decision to include North Korea on the list of state sponsors of terrorism on Tuesday is expected to deal a big blow to the reclusive regime's relations with the international community. The regime has yet to make an official response to the designation, but despite North Korea's 2-month hiatus on provocations, many pundits say there is a chance that Pyongyang will react negatively towards Washington.
North Korea was on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism for 20 years, until George Bush lifted it in 2008 as part of an international effort to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. That effort obviously failed, said Tillerson.
But as a result of actions they've taken, including assassinations outside of their country, using banned chemical weapons, these are all very, very serious actions on their part that put the public at risk as well.
Tillerson referred specifically to the assassination of Kim Jong-un's brother by 2 women at Kuala Lumpur Airport in Malaysia in February. But at a cabinet meeting earlier in the day, President Trump brought up the case of a U.S. student who was returned to the United States earlier this year in a comatose state after a lengthy detention in North Korea and died 6 days after his return home.
Today, the United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Should have happened a long time ago, should have happened years ago. In addition to threatening the world by nuclear devastation, North Korea has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism, including assassinations on foreign soil. As we take this action today, our thoughts turn to Otto Warmbier, wonderful young man, and the countless others so brutally affected by the North Korean oppression. This designation will impose further sanctions and penalties on North Korea and related persons and supports our maximum pressure campaign to isolate the murderous regime that you've all been reading about and in some cases writing about. Tomorrow, the Treasury Department will be announcing an additional sanction and a very large one on North Korea, and this will be going on over the next 2 weeks. It'll be the highest level of sanctions by the time it's finished over a 2-week period. The North Korean regime must be lawful. It must end its unlawful nuclear and ballistic missile development and cease all support for international terrorism, which it is not doing.
Tillerson said North Korea's status as state sponsor of terrorism will affect countries that deal with it because it includes limits that are not covered by economic sanctions.
Well, there could be certain dual-use equipment that may not have been covered under previous sanctions that this would prohibit now a third party selling that dual use. And again, I don't want to suggest to you that the designation is suddenly going to put a whole new layer of sanctions on them, because again, I think we already have North Korea so heavily sanctioned in so many ways with the UN resolutions that have been undertaken, but this will close a few additional loopholes off.
An expert in diplomatic relations says President Trump's decision is a clear sign that the U.S. isn't willing at this moment to negotiate with North Korea over its demand to be recognized as a nuclear state.
In that sense, the United States has closed the door to the possibility of negotiations, and this is going to impact North Korean behavior from now on in a negative manner. Definitely, this explanation is a clear indication that the United States is not going to talk to North Korea as equals.
Regarding the decision's impact on future inter-Korean relations, he said that everything depends on North Korea's behavior.
If North Korea refrains from carrying out provocation, then it increases the chance of a successful inter-Korean dialogue. But if North Korea responds to today's U.S. government action, is going to be aggressive and say another missile launch, then it's going to make the South Korean approach towards North Korea of insisting on dialogue very difficult.
In the case of China, the expert said North Korea's ties are already strained, but not to the extent of the regime's relations with the U.S. However, he added that with the latest news and with the prediction that the Chinese envoy to Pyongyang, Song Tao, was not able to meet the North Korean leader during his recent trip, ties between the countries could worsen.
I don't think the relationship between North Korea and China will ever reach such a like a negative state. But it's possible that the relationship between the two countries will deteriorate further with increasing breakdown of communication between the two countries.
Even before Tuesday's decision, North Korea has been responding sensitively toward being renamed on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, calling it a hostile attitude and adding that Washington should get ready for the consequences.
But he said many countries have already joined the effort to contain North Korea's regime.
In our visit to Vietnam, they have committed that they're going to curtail activities further with North Korea. Malaysia has indicated their curtailment. Singapore has cut off all trade with North Korea. The Philippines have cut off all trade. And just recently, the Deputy Secretary of State's been in Africa. He had meetings with the Sudanese government. The Sudanese government have traditionally been buying military weapons from North Korea. They now have agreed to halt all those purchases.
The decision by the Trump administration has the full support of South Korea. Other nations, including Australia and Japan, are also on board, as it is in line with efforts to increase sanctions and pressure on Pyongyang. Kwon Jang-ho fills us in on the responses.
South Korea woke up to the news on Tuesday morning that the U.S. had relisted North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Seoul's foreign ministry issued a statement backing the move.
The government views this action as part of the international community's efforts to denuclearize North Korea through strong pressure and sanctions, and believes it will help in resolving North Korean nuclear issue peacefully.
Seoul added that they continue to work closely with the U.S. on all matters related to trying to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table, and that relisting the regime as a sponsor of terrorism does not change that. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson also agreed that assassinations ordered by Pyongyang on foreign soil, such as the murder of Kim Jong-un's half-brother Kim Jong-nam in Malaysia earlier this year, constituted a terror attack.
Our government views Kim Jong-nam's assassination as a clear act of terrorism.
Other international partners have expressed their support for the White House's decision. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said that he welcomes the relisting, saying it raises the pressure on North Korea. And Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said it mirrors the determination of the international community to bring North Korea, quote, back to its senses.
Kim Jong-un runs a global criminal operation from North Korea, peddling arms, peddling drugs, engaged in cybercrime, and of course threatening the stability of the region with his nuclear weapons.
Tillerson could not say if China has done enough to stop its fuel shipments to North Korea, but he said long lines at gas stations in the impoverished country are a sign of serious petrol shortages. The Secretary of State said the United States is focused on a mission that is going to change North Korea's path so it can engage with other countries in economic activities beneficial to its citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mara Eliason from NPR. If China does not agree to cut off oil shipments to North Korea, how can you possibly get enough pressure on them to come?
Well, their fuel supplies are already quite constrained, and as I said, we have evidence that there are fuel shortages in North Korea. Obviously, the civilians are by and large the ones that can't get fuel, so we see long lines of vehicles at petrol stations. We see certain petrol stations that appear to be out of fuel because they're closed when normally they'd be open. So there are indications that fuel supplies are already quite tight. As you know, they only refined a small amount of their fuel needs internally. They only have one refinery that operates, and it operates at a low capacity. So they were heavily dependent on imports of finished fuel products, which have been constrained significantly with the UN sanctions.
But is the Chinese action essential? In other words, do you need China to cut off those oil shipments?
I don't know that the cutting off of oil is the magic wand or the silver bullet that is going to bring them to the table. What I would say is the North Koreans have demonstrated in the past they have an enormous capacity to withstand a lot. They'll make their people pay. But they have an enormous capacity to withstand a lot. So I don't want to suggest that we think that one action is all it would take to get them to the table. Well, it's always a difficult choice you make when you impose sanctions in terms of who's really going to bear the burden here. The truth of the matter is the people of North Korea already live under enormously difficult conditions. And I think what we're focused on is a mission that's going to change North Korea's trajectory, change their path. That's the best way we can help the North Korean people in the future, is to have Kim Jong-un reverse his nuclear weapons program, allow us and the rest of the world to then engage with them in economic activity that will ultimately provide a better life for his people.
And my follow-up question, do you believe that the United States is running out of diplomatic options to respond to the nuclear threat of North Korea?
No, I do not.
We've got time for one last question. John Gizzy in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You talked about the limited intelligence on North Korea and on the regime. Is there any evidence of any dissent within Pyongyang at all, or possibly reaction against the current government by other members of the Kim family even, or other opponents to him?
Well, I want to be a little careful about how I answer that. What I would comment on is you're well aware of a number of executions that have occurred within his inner circle and within many of the military people that are close to him. So I'll leave it to your own interpretation.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.